In the 1770s, Ben Franklin created the most positive effect in American history, mainly for his creation of the Postal Service. The Postal Service is the most important creation in America because it led to airmail and overall faster travel. But before we can learn how Benjamin Franklin created the American Postal Service, we first need to take a look back in the 1500s and see how mail worked back then. Back in 1507, the job of Master of Post, which was basically the Postmaster General, was created by Cardinal Wolsey during the reign of Henry VIII. This job was only created for the king. This was not made to the public. The way the public used mail and sending letters was sometimes through pigeons and hawks, though this was not commonly. The most common way was through a trusted servant. A trusted servant was made to memorize a message and then would go to the address of the recipient and tell them the message. In 1635, Royal Mail was founded under Charles I by Thomas Withernus. That's when the Postal Service was officially open to the public. This included the first letter offices. The letter offices went on for a long time, until America was trying to get its independence from England. When the 13 colonies were discovered, getting mail sent was extremely important and held the colonies together. Mail was sent via horseback riders between cities and towns. Getting mail as quickly and dependably was critical to the colony's survival. After the battles at Lexington and Concord, the Congress looked to Ben Franklin to establish a postal service. Benjamin Franklin accepted this offer. Franklin was so good at running a postal service that he became postmaster for all 13 colonies. Franklin eventually put the riders out during the night to cut time because time was very important. Franklin also arranged ships to transport mail to West Indies and Canada. The Massachusetts Bay Colony was also a very important role into establishing the postal system in America. Now that we've learned how the Postal Service was created, let's take a look at what actually came from it. In 1869, it was issued that transactional railroad was completed, opening a new era of communication as well as expansion. But back when railroads only went as far as Missouri, the Pony Express helped cover all ground that the mail train didn't. Speaking of horses, there was also a time where Paul Revere and his night riders used postal system methods to get important information across in secret during the night, but more on that later. In 1910, a rural free delivery carrier using an automobile was used to reach addresses on far-flung routes.
Now back to the reason of postal service with Benjamin Franklin and what made it important in colonial times. Paul Revere was just a normal colonist who was a silversmith with his dad, and which later showed an impact through art by the Boston Massacre art piece. He later became an artist for an indivisible link for the upcoming Revolutionary War, and he was later given orders to join the Sons of Liberty spies and send important information to the Sons of Liberty in Lexington and Concord. Then sent a Pony Express letter, but it began at midnight in 1775 because of the amount of redcoats in their way to Concord and Lexington. So they created a way of communication with lanterns on top of the North Old Church Tower and used the lanterns to know where the British will be coming from. And so they put 2 lanterns, which meant they were coming by the river. As Revere and his pal William Dawes were off to Lexington and Concord, they met up with Samuel Prescott. But Paul Revere was later captured and Dawes fell off his horse and limped back to his hometown. As for Prescott, he managed to send the news to the Sons of Liberty and began doing their part to get an advantage from the British. And while this was happening, a man named Henry Wadsworth Longfellow made an amazing book called Paul Revere's Ride, in which showed what Revere's mission has done for the freedom of our colonies and the effort and sacrifice he was willing to do. The reason of upcoming revolutionary riots all began with the Parliament News of Acts, but especially the Townshed Act. This act meant everything sent in harbors must be guarded by soldiers, plus they were taxed on every goods that came in. The Sons of Liberty decided to take action and show the world, and especially the Parliament, who they really are and what they want. So they attacked harbors and threw tea, which became the Boston Tea Party. After what Paul Revere, William Dawes, and Samuel Prescott did for this country, has given a great advantage to the Patriot Army, and without the hard effort of work, would mean the end of the great liberty of the U.S. in the future. After this event, it led to many multiple ways to honor this day, like comics, parades, plays, etc. And not only that, it has shown how important the way of communication can be important in any problem, and how it can be solved. Even after the war and into the 18th century, his descendant Paul Joseph Revere was well known in the Civil War, which he was granted commander for the Battle of Gettysburg, which took the chance to motivate his men and to send messages to their loved ones and also take a bullet to the lungs. But at last they won the battle, which has shown great amount of honor to the name of the family tree and the Union. And lastly, after Paul Revere's famous Boston Massacre art piece, it was then showed to the world to see. Another man named Peter Pelham designed it the same way in the 18th century because he was inspired and encouraged by the background and history of this art piece, in which later inspired other famous men and women artists to see the true meaning of history art, like John Singleton Copley, who had an idea of Paul Revere and Queen Victoria art and made it an amazing art piece out of his mother. But with these examples showed that not only communication can be by letters and postal service, but can be shown through art by its connections of our history timeline of America, and maybe even our national timeline.